Well, good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. I'm Laura Polari-Welbus, Director of Encore Learning, and delighted to have you all here today for a really exciting presentation, timely. We are in a Zoom meeting today, so questions will be answered via the chat. You'll put them in the chat, and Louise will prompt those when our presenter is ready for them. And I will put a link to the survey to evaluate the session today in the chat later in the session, so you can do participate in that survey. And also, this event is being recorded, so it will be available on our YouTube channel probably tomorrow. So with that, Louise, you can go ahead and talk about what's coming up next and introduce our speaker.
Perfect. Laura, thank you very much. I'm Louise Kenny. Many of you I know personally from all the tours that we've done, and of course, you know me from these Zooms. I'm on the Special Events Committee. We have 5 of us on there, and I do want to put a little plug in for the Special Events Committee because we uncover interesting presentations like this and also tours. So do think about joining us if you're interested. Laura can connect you with us. We have a really fun presentation today. Well, before I get to that, let me just tell you what's coming up. Next Monday is a film that we're showing at the library called Rosenwald. And it's about Julius Rosenwald, who was one of the first presidents of Sears, and his philanthropic work in introducing Rosenwald schools to African Americans early in the 1900s, and also supporting the arts with Black artists. So it's a very interesting presentation. We do ask you to register by this Wednesday. There is a limited capacity in the library, and we're at almost 100 people. So please do register that, and please do join us next week. That will be interesting. And then we have a bunch of tours coming up in June. I know there'll be a communication going out later this week, so I won't list them all. But as you know, a lot of our tours do sell out quickly. So please do, if you're interested, please do. Uh, excuse me. Um, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jeremey Baskin and his topic. Jeremey is a lawyer by trade, an international customs lawyer. He's retired as full-time, but he's a consultant, so he's very busy in his profession. But by avocation and by interest, he is a horse racing handicapper. And as he likes to say, it put him through law school. So he's got a lot of interesting stories about horse racing and about his adventure in horse racing and handicapping, and he will teach us all about the terms in horse racing, and also how to think about betting in horse racing and handicapping horse races. And our timing on this is perfect because the Kentucky Derby is coming up, so he's going to give us his thoughts about handicapping the Kentucky Derby. Again, don't forget to fill the survey out at the end and enjoy our presentation. Jeremey?
Thank you. Thank you, Louise. I'd like to thank Louise and Laura for helping me today to share my lifetime avocation. And I'd like to thank Encore for thinking about this, even though, well, let's put it this way. My good friend Michael Stutz, who is a big wheel in Encore, has been kind of poking me gently. He's saying, people would be interested in this. I insisted they would not, but he finally wore me down, and here we are. He's convinced me to do this, even though he's dining in some castle in Edinburgh right now. I'd like to give special thanks to my lifelong friends, because as the promos said, I first walked into a racetrack on July 4th, 1971, and a few friends walked in with me, and there were 3 of us that came away with a lifelong avocation. And that lifelong avocation I like to share with my friends Howard Neustadt and Bobby Seidenberg. And we still converse about horse racing today, wouldn't think of anything about it. We are 3 handicappers who go about it in very, very different ways, but that doesn't matter. It's differences of opinion that make a horse race. But really, what I would like to talk to is the genetic portion of it. Because even though horse racing came to central Pennsylvania, we grew up in 1972, about a year after that historic stop by Delaware Park, which got me interested in everything, we realized that we were the 3 that kept going. And why? Our dads. There has to be a genetic element to it because Mort Seidenberg, Ben Neustadt, and my dad, Leon Baskin, were some of the finest handicappers we knew. And like, for example, Mort Seidenberg, I remember sitting in Bobby's family room when Mort had a good day at the track. He came in and said, well, hey, Mort, how'd you do? He said, I did really well. He took his toupee and threw it off. He did that well. Ben Neustadt, you could normally find with a winning ticket in his hand in a cashier's line. And by the time my dad was done, well, he didn't really go all that often, but he liked to look at the racing form. But what he did tell me was, you can see from the first slide, that's me on the left at in front of the totalizator board at Presque Isle Downs up in Erie. But who's that gentleman to the right? Well, that gentleman to the right was very, very famous in handicapping world in Great Britain in the 1930s and 40s. He was a racetrack tout. He passed himself off as Prince Monalulu, and that was his name, and everybody in horse racing in England knew who Prince Monalulu was. You can see he's got his arm raised with documents in it, and he would yell, I have a horse, I have a horse. Was he a Hawaiian prince? Nothing of the sort. He was from St. Croix, and he made his way to Great Britain and found this, and he became a racetrack tout of great renown. And in so much that in football pools, I've used his pseudonym of Prince Monalulu, but there he is. I would also like to encourage people to ask questions and ask questions of Louise, and she'll pass them on to me. And I don't want to wait until the end. If a question pops up that you're thinking about, please go ahead and ask it. And it may be something I plan to answer later on in the session, or it may be something that we can deal with right at that time. So let's do that. So I'm all set. I feel like I'm at the races because what do I have? I've got my Coca-Cola. I'm sitting at a table and I'm pretending that Side and Biff are here with me. Now, there are lots of different kinds of horse racing. There are quarter horses, there are other types of racing. I bet on thoroughbreds and thoroughbreds on what they call flats. Flats are racing around the oval. There are also jumpers. My friend Mr. Neustadt, he's an absolute genius with regard to jumpers. I couldn't make hide nor hair of them. My friend Mr. Seidenberg is what I call a pace handicapper. So Mr. Neustadt jumpers high level stuff. The Derby, high level, expensive horses. That's where he shines. Mr. Seidenberg is the best pace handicapper I have ever encountered in my life. He's kind of middle brow. He can handle a pace of any race and tell you who is going to be where at certain parts in it. I'm okay at that, but nowhere near as good. I like to think of myself as more lowbrow. We'll get to it. Maidens and cheap maidens, the consistency of inconsistency. That's where I do my best work. And I'm often teased of, oh, if I hit a big one, what was it, a 5,000 maiden? And the answer is often yes. So I want to point your attention to the slide. And with the slide, we have a couple of very, very important quotations. The first one has to do with something that I stole from a eating club in Princeton, where I was there with a friend for a Penn Princeton football game. And what it said in their billiard room was, to be a good billiards player is the mark of a gentleman. To be too good a billiards player is this mark of an ill-spent youth. And so, okay, I'm going to cop to an ill-spent youth. And then, of course, the wise words of Damon Runyon. Damon Runyon, the race is not always to the swift, nor the contest to the strong, but that's the way to bet. So what are we going on here? What's up? What are we planning to do here? Okay, let's talk about what's going forward. What are we betting on? Horses. Yeah. Yeah, okay, they're all generically known as horses, but are they all, quote, horses? Well, they're not, and we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the surfaces they run on. Do you remember the surface that I showed you here? I'm standing in front of the totalizator board at Presque Isle Downs. Well, wait a second, the surface is black. Well, that's because it's synthetic. We'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about the other surfaces, which are turf and dirt. What is paramu and are all the tracks the same? Of course not. No pun intended. I bet you can guess the answer. What's parimutuel betting? How are the odds determined? Believe it or not, you the bettor determines the odds. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about who is the most influential person at the racetrack. It's not the owner, it's not a trainer or anything. It's a person, usually a male. I'm not aware, I think statistically inevitable that there had to have been a female racing secretary, or there are. Most of the ones I've encountered have all been males. Do trainers and jockeys, do they make a difference? Trainers, absolutely. Jockeys, yeah, yeah, but not as much as, in my view, trainers. But there's often a link to trainers' intentions, depending upon the jockeys that they use. What are the basic principles of handicapping? Well, I have been greatly influenced by a man named Andrew Beyer. Andrew Beyer is semi-retired now. He's probably in his 80s. He's probably 10 years older than I am. And Andrew Beyer um, came up with a book. He wrote a book called Picking Winners back in 1975. And my wife, who has tolerated my avocation all these years, God bless her, she gave me that book with the inspiration of and the inscription of, if you can't beat him, join him. And that book was extremely influential as to how I go about my business. And in fact, I was engaged in some of the methods that Andrew Beyer suggested without even knowing it. So with that confluence and his ability, and what he did was put a numerical value to every horse race in the United States. And when we look at the past performances, which I'm going to show you really, really quickly here when we're done, so you can get an idea of where we're going to go at the end when we finally do handicap the Kentucky Derby. You'll get an idea, and it's going to be, if you're not an experienced horse race handicapper, it is going to look like an amalgam of stuff. And everything in the past performance is meaningful. It's all there for a reason. And learning, there's no Rosetta Stone. You just have to learn by trial and error and just by going to the track and betting. Um, and we're also going to talk about AI. Does AI have an influence in our betting now? The answer is yes, but is it a solution? No, because everybody would be betting on AI, and you'll see if everybody bet on the same horse, there'd be no horse racing. But AI has an influence. It is an aid, I would say, but not a solution. I'm, being the age I am, I'm extremely kind of lukewarm about it. And the interesting thing is, when we do handicap the Kentucky Derby, there's going to be my handicapping, and we're going to compare it to who AI picks, and we'll see who does better. Um, AI is basically, I get caught in something called the information overload paradox, in that it can do so much. Does that, can you see the forest for the trees with it? And the answer is, yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. What I want to show you really quickly, and here's where I technologically can sometimes fall shy, is I want to toggle to, um, let's see, if I could call on Louise to remind me what I had to do here. I want to hit escape.
Escape,
Escape.
or just minimize your presentation.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. There we go. And we're going to minimize that because we want to show you what can you see what a past performance looks like. Is that showing up on the screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. This is what a past performance here. Churchill Downs, the 12th race on Saturday, May 2nd. You can see it's a graded one stakes. They're running for a purse of $5 million. We'll talk about how purses are set and how much you get. As it turns out, the winner gets 60% of that. So the winner is going to get 3 million bucks. Um, and it gets parsed out second, third, fourth, all the way down. And what it shows you are there are 20 horses in the Derby this year. And you can see this closer look that you see down here. That's only for special races. The Derby gets it, big races get it, the Preakness will, Belmont, things like that. It normally would not appear in a daily racing form, but you can see that there are going to be 20 horses in this race. I'm just going to scroll down slowly. But, to give you an idea, and there it goes over further, and there are comments and things like that. So there's a lot to see. You can see this horse has raced three times in its life and won all three, but he's won them in Japan. Is he going to win it out on Saturday? I don't think so, but that's another issue. But this just gives you an idea of what it looks like. So I'm going to escape this again. Going to get rid of this for now, and we're going to go back to our, there we go. Um, I guess, is anybody bothered by it showing up on the left here? I would
Just go ahead and click play from current slide.
play from current slide. Thank you. Done. All right. Thoroughbred horses. What are they? Let's quote Shakespeare. A horse, my kingdom for a horse. The irony is today's thoroughbreds, you can see the horse on the left. The horse on the left is somebody known as the Darley Arabian. The Darley Arabian is one of three horses, and we'll get the Godolphin Arabian and the Byerly Turk. Every horse race, every thoroughbred horse in the United States right now, and all over the world, are related to one of them. And they were brought into England in the late 17th, early 18th century. So the horse that Shakespeare was talking about was not a thoroughbred. But My Kingdom for a Horse, look at this. All horses have the same birthdays, all thoroughbreds, January 1st. So they like to be foaled in the beginning of the year because you'd rather have them be 11 months old before they're called a yearling than 9 months old or 8 months old. 2-year-olds, they're called juveniles. They run against each other. They do have championships, the Breeders' Cup. Um, and the 2-year-olds, fillies, colts, they generally don't, they can race against each other. They often don't. 3-year-olds then is what we're talking about with the Derby. So what you're seeing now, and this year they're all colts. There might be a gelding or two. There are no fillies in the Derby this year. There have been. Fillies have won the Derby. Winning Colors has won it. Genuine Risk has won it. So it is not out of the realm. Um, but what these 3-year-olds are not the most mature racehorses. Those generally are 4 and 5. So when you look at the Derby, you're really looking at what's the equivalent of maybe March Madness, because these are maturing horses, but they're 3-year-olds. If you really wanted to go to the Super Bowl, that would be in the fall, where they call Breeders' Cup. And the Breeders' Cup is held once a year at different locations, and they have a bunch of different types of races that horses can participate in depending upon their age and their gender. Males versus females. When we use the generic term horse, the generic term horse covers colt males who are 4-year-olds and up. If Who are over 4. If they're 4 or under, they're colts. They could also be geldings or ridgelings. Okay, what's a gelding? A gelding is a horse that doesn't have his testicles because they're removed. Why do they remove them? Let's use an example. Forgo. Forgo was known as the great gelding of the 1970s. Forgo, before he was gelded, was obstreperous, and 2, attracted to any filly who flounced on by. So, in order to corral this libido and to deal with the obstreperous nature of Forgo, he was gelded, and he became one of the great champions of all time. John Henry was a gelding. Earlier in the 60s, Kelso was a gelding. So there have been great racehorses who are geldings. What about a ridgeling? Well, a ridgeling is a horse, it's a male, whose testicles have not descended, or at least a testicle has not descended. So they are a ridgeling because they don't have the two in the proper order. Again, and females, if they're 4 or younger, they're fillies. If they're 5 or older, they're mares. Um, Fillies and mares tend to run against each other. They don't have to. They could cross over and run in an open race. The opposite is not true. If it's a filly and mare race, then the fillies and mares are exclusive to that. You can't run a gelding or a colt in a filly and mare race. In fact, we're looking at the Kentucky Derby. And the Kentucky Derby is an open race. Fillies can run in it. The day before the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs, they run something called the Kentucky Oaks. And in the Kentucky Oaks, it's all fillies. So the champion 3-year-old fillies are done by the Kentucky Oaks. They have the Black Eyed Susan Stakes at Pimlico. There's also a stakes at Belmont for the fillies to run in, but they can cross over, and they have crossed over, and they have won. So breeding, as we will learn, can influence a horse's speed and stamina. There are famous sires who transmit stamina to their offspring. There are other sires who are more speed oriented. They can run shorter distances and faster times. And so with that, you have that ability to, and I look to Mr. Newstat to help me with breeding sometimes. Um, the Derby is an interesting race in that it's a mile and a quarter. A mile and a quarter is generally further than any of these horses have ever gone. And so they like to have some stamina in their breeding. Sometimes horses will be placed in the Derby and they'll be speedballs with the hope that they get out there and can maintain their speed for a mile and a quarter. Tough thing to do. Even tougher in the Belmont, which is a mile and a half. There, let's move on to the next slide. And tracks and surfaces. These matter. What you see in that picture is a picture of Churchill Downs. You'll see the twin spires. This is where the Derby is going to be run. But you notice they've got a course here. That's a turf course. They've got a course here. That's their dirt course. All right. We've quoted one of my favorite horse trainers of all time, a gentleman named Michael W. Dickinson. He is still with us. He's in his late 80s. He has stopped training horses, but he was very, very influential in the development of synthetic racetracks. And the synthetic racetracks we're talking about are made of layers of, oh, there's rubberized stuff, there's all kinds of layers that I don't even begin to know, but they drain well, and there are a few tracks around. Um, Presque Isle, where I was there, Woodbine, which is the track just outside Toronto, is a synthetic track. Gulfstream Park in Florida is a synthetic track. Turfway Park in Kentucky is also a synthetic track. Synthetic, you can't tell. I mean, there's no great difference. I think a synthetic track runs a bit more like a turf race, a turf course than dirt. But that's just me. That's the way I approach things. Most tracks are 1 mile in circumference. So you start right in front of the grandstand, you go around it once, you go for a mile. What they have on the backstretch is what they call a chute, and the chute goes back, and so they can run sprint races from the chute. They go around one turn. When you're at Belmont, because the track is so big, they can run 1 mile races around one turn since the track is a mile and a half. The Belmont Stakes, which are held at Belmont Park in most years. This year they won't be. It's the last year of the renovation of Belmont, so the Belmont will be back next year. But most of the time, they are run at a mile and a half around the circle there. This year it'll just be a mile and a quarter at Saratoga. I always preferred it when it was a mile and a half because you could really tell the stamina horses in those cases. There's also these smaller tracks. Charlestown is known as a bull ring. It's only 3/4 of a mile. So they have a 6.5 furlong race that goes around once. The turns are tighter. The jockeys are more attuned to running around that. The trainers specially train these horses in order to run around those tight turns. I find that very interesting. There are others who say that's a bull ring. I'm not interested. Not me. A lot of tracks have a dirt track and a turf course. That dirt track and a turf course, um, as you can see, they could go either way. Weather dictates how the tracks are designated. When we get to the past performances, you'll see. The weather dictates the dirt tracks, as you can see it right there. There are their four, and it's very obvious. A good track is a drying out track. It turns out this weekend, the weather in Louisville is supposed to be pretty good. expect it to be a fast track. Weather also dictates on turf courses, and you can see their what they can be called. Synthetic tracks are always fast. Track biases. There are some tracks that have a reputation for being kinder to front-running horses than closers. Pimlico had this reputation for a long time. I don't think it was necessarily fair, but for a time it was. Saratoga has a reputation as being the graveyard of favorites because a lot of favorites have lost there. Secretariat lost there, and we'll talk about that later on. Um, Andrew Beyer, who I am going to discuss later on, when he brought track biases to the fore. He is from Erie, Pennsylvania. Presque Isle did not exist back when he was growing up, nor did the track that was there as a predecessor for Presque Isle called Commodore Downs. Commodore Downs, when it opened up, Beyer, whose mother was still living in Erie, decided he would, take his mother to the track. His mother gave a, shall we say, a jaundiced eye to her son's avocation. Well, actually, it was his vocation by then, until he figured out nobody from the one and the two hole was winning anything. So you could put Secretariat in the one or two hole and they wouldn't win. Everything on the outside was winning, but it was a new game in town, and the group and the crowd was rather unsophisticated, so they didn't know that. And so his mother had a very different view of his vocation when she was cashing tickets. Moving on, parimutuel wagering. My favorite, one of my favorites, Groucho Marx. There it is. I once bet a horse at 10 to 1. He came in at quarter to 4. A friend of mine who I tipped off was coming here sent me a Henny Youngman joke. And the Henny Youngman joke, or at least was attributed to him, he bet a horse that came in so late he had to tiptoe into the stables. What is parimutuel wagering all about? Well, how do they set the odds on the horses? You do, as the bettor. The bettor sets the odds. So you can see the track gets its cut. So it's generally, they call it the takeout. For our example, we'll talk about takeout on win, place, and show bets. Takeout on win, place, and show bets is around 15%. So suppose there are $10,000 bet on the favorite. Oh, there are $10,000 bet on a race. $5,000 was bet on the favorite. If you were going to give all the money back, the favorite, upon whom $5,000 was bet, the bettors get to carve up that 5,000 that was not bet on that horse if he wins, and they should get back even money. If you bet $2 on him, you get back 4. You get back your original 2 plus the 2 you won. However, when you have the takeout, that makes it a little bit different. So that means 100% of the money goes in, but only 85% comes back. So that horse upon which $5,000 would bet would only have $8,500 to split. So the winning ticket on that horse would probably be either $3.20 or $3.40 on a winning $2 bet because the track gets its piece. Okay. And with that, we have exotic wagers. And you'll see when we get to the Derby, win, place, and show always have their places. And so, like win, place, and show, I would like to retreat for a moment to say with place and show, you are say that same $10,000 was bet for place, and the favorite came in first, and the second favorite came in second. There'd only be $8,500 to split, but they would have to split it again. So the odds and what you would get on a $2 bet on a favorite on a win on a place or a show bet is going to be closer to $2.40 or $2.60. I don't bet win and play. I don't bet place and show all that much. Sometimes if it's a very long shot or a very weird situation, there have been situations where I'll look at a tote board and say, "Oh my God, somebody bet a huge pile of money on some horse to show just because they thought, okay, I'll get back at $2.40, $2.60. I'll get back 30% in my investment." Well, what that does is screw things up because all of a sudden you've got a ton of money on a horse that only has to finish in the top three. But if he doesn't finish in the top three, the other horses will get some phenomenal payoff that you wouldn't have expected to get. Doesn't happen very often. Every once in a while, I'll look to it. I've looked here, the exotic wagers. You can see, you can read it just as well as I can. I tend to play a lot of exactas, picking the first two horses in order. And you've heard of the daily double. The daily double used to be long ago and far away, was only offered on the first two races. And you had to pick the winner of the first race and the winner of the second race. If you picked the winner of the first race but didn't pick the winner of the second race, you didn't win. But the same parimutuel kind of thought goes into all of those in that you're splitting the same amount of money over different odds. And you can even pick a superfecta. Very rarely do I play those. Pick threes are fine. The pick three, pick four, pick five, and pick six are picking that many winners in a row of races. I tend to stop at a pick four, and I don't bet them all that often. I will bet a pick four from time to time if I have a very strong opinion on a horse in a particular race, and I can do what they call single him. So you bet on a couple of horses in one race, a couple more in the next race, you're single, and then a couple more. I'll do that from time to time. But picking winners in consecutive order in these races, not that easy. Trust me. Now they have what they call daily rolling daily doubles. You can bet a daily double on the first and second race, second and third and fourth. Didn't used to be that way long ago and far away when I started in the game, but now it is. And a lot of people enjoy doing that. The takeout is higher on the exotic and multiple race wagers. Now, how do I wager normally? Online. There are a ton of online um, resources, and those online resources um, let you do basically everything. There's a online service called Twin Spires. Who owns Twin Spires? Churchill Downs. The Daily Racing Form has their own online service called First Bet. First Bet Pro. I happen to have accounts in both because the way that the horse race structure is, Churchill Downs does all of their online wagering through Twin Spires. If you've got First Pro, you can't bet on that through various contracts, and I don't even begin to know how they work. First Pro, though, you can bet on the Preakness, you can bet on the Belmont, you can bet on all the others, but you can't bet on the Derby. So I have my Twin Spires account basically for that. And interestingly, at Presque Isle, I do bet on Presque Isle races from time to time, and I use that account. So a lot of the work is done via online wagering. And when at the beginning of our session, you'll see me standing in front of the totalizator board. That board gives you the odds on all the horses that are in the upcoming race, and they flash on and off every minute. So the odds change as the money comes in and switches. So you could have a horse that's 5-1, and then the next flash, he's 3-1. It is not unusual, and I'm going to come back to where I was. Um, Oh, and I want to talk about that horse race in a second. It is not unusual for that last flash to have an influence on the races. I have, in many instances, bet on a horse I thought I was getting 5-2. The last flash, he's 4-5, and I go, ugh. But it's happened the other way too. I'll bet on a horse that's 3-1, and then the last flash, he's 7-1, and I go, hooray, I hope he hits. So it's an interesting thing. What I've showed you here is a triple dead heat. When horses tie in a race, it's called a dead heat. This is a very famous triple dead heat from the Carter Handicap in 1944. What happens if there's a dead heat? Well, you divide the money, you count them all as winners. And so they divide the money and the payoff goes down. If you bet a horse at 4-1 and he's in a dead heat, you'll probably get about a 2-1 payoff. Those are Brownie, Bossuet, and Wait a Bit, very famous. My friends and I enjoyed. There was a race at Penn National, which would have been that, except that the first place horse got his nose right up. Weird Harold, Lee Matt, and Mr. Zip. Lee Matt, who is a white horse, which there aren't tons of, but there are, was an ex champion. He was a stakes horse. He ran for big money. He managed to get his nose just up on those two, and we still talk about it to this day. So that's how parimutuel racing is figured out. Have there been any questions? Does anybody, or shall I just continue on my dissertation here? Do we have anything so far, Louise?
No, we're fine.
Okay,
Continue.
very good.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Um, that gentleman right there is, I'm going to call him probably my favorite horse trainer. Why? Because he is precisely 2 days older than I am. His name is Bill Mott, and he's got a horse in the Derby that we are going to talk about in a little while. But Mr. Mott, he won last year with a horse named Sovereignty. I'm a little less excited about his horse this year, but we'll talk about that in a while. I leave you a quotation there from Eddie Arcaro. Eddie Arcaro was a famous jockey back in the 1940s. He did win a Triple Crown. That was a Whirlaway Citation. I can't remember. I think it was Whirlaway. And there's a very famous story. Maybe it's apocryphal, maybe it's not. But Eddie Arcaro accepted a horse, a mount, from a trainer who was less experienced. Eddie was in demand, and the top trainers would all want him riding their horses. Well, he did accept a ride on this horse. Before the race, the trainer said, "Okay, I don't want you to go right to the lead. I want you to lay third or fourth, stalk the leaders on the back stretch, make your move on the far stretch, and then bring them home down the stretch. Make your move on the turn, I beg, and bring them home down the stretch." Eddie said, "Great, I'll do that." The horses broke. Eddie broke last, and the horse remained last the entire way around the oval. When the race was over, the trainer accosted him and said, "Eddie, I thought I instructed you to do A, B, and C." And Eddie responded, "I would have, but I would have had to leave the horse." So sometimes the trainers can overestimate the ability um, uh, of their training. Let's move on to Mr. Mott, and here we go. Trainers, I think, are very influential. Some are very hands-on, others are less so. For one of the less so, a gentleman just died. He was in his 90s, who had one of the great horse racing names of all time, a gentleman named King T. Leatherberry. And King T. Leatherberry was a very successful trainer in Maryland. He had a horse named DeBoss who won. He never won a big race, but he won a lot of races, and he was basically a handicapper. He didn't spend a lot of time in the barn. He didn't spend a lot of time with his hands on the horses. He had a lot of assistants. He knew what to do, but he spent most of his time handicapping, and he was very successful over the years. In fact, a couple of years ago, he still had one or two horses in training for owners that he had worked with for many, many years. And so, with that, he's that kind. The guys in the Derby, and the all guys, there's going to be a woman, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Not going to be, there is. And I kind of like her horse too, her colt. And they have discernible methods, the trainers. I remember I talked about Secretariat. Secretariat lost to a horse named Prove Out, and he lost to another horse named Onion, both um, trained by a gentleman named Alan Jerkins. Alan Jerkins was one of the great trainers of all time. Secretariat was one of the great horses of all time. And Secretariat ran his race, but Prove Out beat him um, because he just ran the race of his life that day. And Andrew Beyer, who we talked about before, was interested because in that race, it had been his experience that Alan Jerkin's methods always involved one very fast workout prior to the race day. Few 3, 4 days prior to the races, he'd do a workout, and we'll talk about workouts later, and the workout would be very fast. Well, Beyer had recognized that he did this, and with it, he said, I didn't see one for Prove Out. What happened? Well, it turns out when he interviewed Jerkins, Jerkins said, "Oh yeah, there was one." And he first of all he insisted he had no method, but then he said, "Oh yeah, but I did have a real fast workout. The clockers just didn't catch it." And so you can, and when I was doing what I was doing at Penn National with the efficacy I was doing it, I could look at horses and their trainers and say, "Yeah, this is what I'm expecting from him," and I was generally reasonably accurate. Jockey switches. What can they do? They can designate an owner's intent. In this year's Derby, there is Brad Cox is a trainer, and Brad has three different horses in this race. The rider who has first call for Brad Cox is a great rider. His name is Irad Ortiz. And Irad Ortiz got his choice of which of three of Brad Cox's entries he wanted to ride. And he chose the favorite, Renegade. And we'll talk about that. Jockeys are not always the best handicappers, but they do have some instincts. Now, men versus women in training. As you can see, I am a rabid feminist. And as Mr. Neustadt and Mr. Seidenberg can attest, back in the 1970s, there were a lot of people who were dismissive, shall we say, of female trainers. Not us. There was a trainer named Barbara Keyes. Barbara Keyes was a great, great trainer, and her daughter, Sherry Keyes. I cashed a lot of tickets on Barbara Keyes at payoffs that were higher than they probably should have been because of this prejudice. It's slowly gone away. Now, when I look at it, I have a stable and I keep track of certain trainers whose methods I really admire. And I did a quick analysis and I thought, man, a lot of them are females. Geez, I wonder how that's held up. And I went and I looked, 75% of the trainers that I follow are women. And in fact, one woman, Erin McClellan, who's a very accomplished horsewoman and trainer at Penn National, my friends, Mr. Neustadt and Seidenberg, have referred to her as, quote, my girlfriend. She is not my girlfriend. I've never met her. I have a wife. I don't have any girlfriends. But when it comes to training, you always take a second look at her horses. And I could go down an entire list. There is a trainer in the Derby, Sherry DeVoe, top flight trainer. I think her horse has got a good chance to really run well. Top tier jockeys matter. Everybody, every jockey, well, most everybody, every jockey in the Derby is going to be one of the best in the world. And they're the best in the world because they have a sense of pace. They know how to talk to a horse. They just are really, really attuned to their surroundings. And they're just really talented, really strong riders. And there was a case in point. Back in 1979, there was a horse named Spectacular Bid. I had the honor of watching Spectacular Bid win the Preakness. He had won the Derby, he won the Preakness. He was ridden by what they call an apprentice jockey. And we'll talk about apprentice jockeys in a second as to how they come to be present apprentice jockeys. A jockey named Ronnie Franklin. Ronnie Franklin won on the Derby and he won on the Preakness. And Ronnie Franklin was of the opinion, there was great pressure on the trainer of Spectacular Bid, a gentleman named Grover Delp. Everybody knew him by his nickname Bud Delp. And Delp stuck with Franklin and he lost to Belmont. And there are people that were saying, yeah, anything but an apprentice jock might have won that race. Well, that's open to winning the Triple Crown is a really, really, really tough thing to do. So was he complicit in it? There were a lot of people who thought he was. I was less sure of that, but he was required to shoulder a lot of the blame. Apprentice jockeys get what they call weight allowances. We won't see it in our Derby past performances, but these weight allowances allow them to get weight off. So every horse you'll see in the Kentucky Derby, every horse carries 126 pounds. And the jockeys, for the most part, race at much lower weights than that, probably 10 to 12 pounds less. The way they put weights in the saddle to make it come to weight. If you're an apprentice jockey, if you're a brand new apprentice and haven't won any races, up to you win like 5 races, you get 10 pounds. There are a lot of trainers who think that's very valuable to get a 10-pound weight allowance because that means your horse is carrying that less weight. I'm not quite as convinced about that, but that's just me. Other handicappers use it and use weight to great advantage. That allowance becomes less as they win more races. It becomes a 7 pound and then a 5 pound allowance, which they keep for 1 year. After that, then they are a journeyman and they don't get that weight allowance anymore. In the races that I play, um, a lot of young jockeys and inexperienced jockeys do ride, and it uh, is of some note when you see, particularly an experienced trainer, and if an experienced trainer is using an apprentice jockey, that often is a signal that, yeah, well, maybe I'm not as into this. Maybe my concerns about this horse are, and I'm going to give this jockey some experience. So trainers and jockeys, they matter. Trainers a lot, jockeys some. Ah, racing conditions. Kenny Rogers in the first condition. Let's see what condition my condition was in. If you remember that song, I'm not even going to begin to expect you to have any idea what these conditions are. And here is a condition for a particular race at Charlestown. And I'll let it up there for, 10 seconds so you can read it and scrunch your nose and, scrunch your forehead and say, what on earth are they talking about? But conditions are very important. And one thing that all handicappers agree on, I think, is that the conditions are important. Who sets the conditions? The racing secretary. The racing secretary is aware of all the horses on the ground and all the horses of trainers who train on the ground. And so they'll set their conditions in a manner to try to get the most entries they can per race. The purse structure. We talked about purse structure. Different tracks have different purses. You have the high level tracks, New York, California, um, Kentucky. They offer the highest purses. Lesser tracks, such as in Pennsylvania, Maryland, um, Colonial Downs in Virginia has pretty good purse structure. But you can see typically that's how the purses are divided up. And what kind of races do we have? Well, you'll hear maiden races, and you heard me talk about maiden races early on in our discussion. And maiden races are for horses who have never won. So there are horses that have never won that are expensive. And they go into a race called a maiden special weight, and that's for the more expensive horses that are running against each other to try to win their first race. The vast majority of races that are run at tracks are what they call claiming races. So if I'm an owner and I've entered my horse in a $10,000 claiming race, anybody can claim that horse. Any other owner can claim that horse from that claiming race, and then they own it. But what they don't do is get any of the purse. So if you claim a horse for $10,000 and that horse wins the race, the old owner gets the money and your $10,000. He gets the purse winnings and the $10,000, and congratulations, the horse is yours. If that horse does not finish the race or that horse gets injured, lucky new owner, the injury is your problem. So they grade them in by dollar values. 5,000 claimers are generally the lowest that I've encountered now. I think there are probably some small tracks out west where you can get for lower. Um, but that 10,000, it kind of keeps the competition even. So if you have a $50,000 horse and you enter him in a $5,000 race, he's almost certainly going to win that race, but you're also going to get him claimed. So he won't be your horse anymore. It's claiming is an ingenious way to keep the competition level. Now, in my handicapping world, if a horse has been running for 25,000 and is suddenly running for five, my eyebrow goes up because I go, okay, what's wrong with him? And the other thing is those horses often go off at very unappetizingly low odds. And so I kind of stay away from that. But it's interesting that, and they're in maiden races, they're maiden claiming races. So you could claim a horse that's in a $10,000 maiden race. You want to claim that horse for 10? It's yours, even though it hasn't won yet. Hopefully it'll do a little bit better for you and your trainer. Allowance races are races in which you cannot get claimed. They are for higher quality animals. And you'll see when we look at our Derby past performances, a lot of animals are start out in allowance races. That's a normal progression. And then stakes races are the highest value races. And you can see from the Derby, which is one of the highest value of all, that is known as a stakes race. Now, what kind of distances do they run? You can see sprints, less than a mile, measured in furlongs. You could be in Charlestown, my favorite bull ring, the shortest race is 4.5 furlongs. That is a blaze. Those horses go out there really fast because they don't have to run that long. Some of the fastest horses I've ever seen that for that first quarter mile are those allowance horses at Charlestown running for that first turn. Um, you can be 5 furlongs, 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs. The differences require different abilities in the horses. 7 furlong races are tough races to run. They're kind of sprints, but they're almost a route race. And you can see route races are a mile and over. The Derby, mile and a quarter, is known as a route race. Um, Weights, we talked about weights. The Derby, everybody carries 126 pounds, except if you're a filly, you only carry 121. So for some reason, they give fillies a weight break in those instances. Um, and not all races of the same apparent value are equal. We'll get to that in a minute when we get to the heart of handicapping.
Jeremy, let me just interrupt for a second.
Please.
We did get a comment in chat that Prove Out, a horse that you must know,
Yes.
beat beat Forgo,
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure he did. Yeah.
Secretariat, and Riva Ridge in three consecutive races in late and summer and fall 2000, 1973.
Yes, that's probably true. Yes,
Okay,
I would
just
agree with that. Prove Out was a
yes.
great, great horse. There's no
Okay,
question about it. He also beat Secretariat. Onion also beat Secretariat. Jerkins was a master. There's no question about it. And so I
okay. Just want to.
agree. I agree. And they have enhanced my presentation, and I thank them for that.
Okay, it's Biff.
Um,
Biff suggested that Biff. Biff.
oh, of course it's Biff. I mean, he I have already extolled his abilities on
Okay,
this
there
on
you go.
this thing. He's a great handicapper. That's all I could say. Um, in his book, Picking Winners, Andrew Beyer quoted George C. Scott from Patton, and instead of using horse race handicapping in the movie, it's war. But as Beyer said, even when he loses, he walks away from it saying, "But God help me, I do love it so." And so do I. If I go to the track and I lose, I don't care. I care insofar as that I've lost, but it's just so much fun. And it's so cool. And sometimes, like right now, I'm handicapping. I'm in a bit of a lull. I have been very hot, and you have to accept that. When you get into your lull, you step back a little bit. And that's where I'm in right now. But that's okay. I'm good. The Derby's coming, and the lull's going to end. Andrew Beyer, he wrote the book that I just showed you, where he figures out a number for each race. When he was a young handicapper, and let's just say he got his chops in New England because he went to Harvard. And as he said, when he was a senior at Harvard, he had a choice. He could either go to his final on Elizabethan poetry, or he could go to Suffolk Downs to bet what he thought was a very encouraging stakes race there. He chose Suffolk Downs, probably much to his mother's chagrin. But what he did was give us information. He looked and he said, there's got to be a way to compare races of different horses at different distances at different tracks. And he went about the business of figuring that out. Incredibly laborious, incredibly intricate. But he said, okay, what they don't take into account is the quality of races. How fast is each race for each level of participant? So if you had an allowance race, you expect it to be a little bit faster than a claiming race. If you had a $25,000 claiming race, you would expect it to be faster than a $10,000 claiming race. If you had a low-level maiden race, you expected that to be the slowest of them all. But that always didn't happen in how they would rate rate the races. And so what Beyer did was take that information and he took the class of the race, the track variant of the race, how close were they running to the track records that day, and he managed to put a um, figure on that. And the figures were done in a manner that I can't even begin to explain. But what he did do was take that number, and you'll see the number 100 is kind of a touchstone for the Derby in that you expect the Derby winner to run over 100. He said when he did Secretariat's um, uh, Beyer, and they call them Beyer figures, he sold, presumably he sold, I doubt he gave them, he sold his methods to the Daily Racing Form. So now every race has Beyers, and I think rising Beyers are indicative of an improving horse. But every horse has that number, and he said he's never been so moved as when he put the number on Secretariat's 31 length victory in the Belmont in 1973, and the number was 141. He said he just figured it out and he sat in disbelief. We're not going to see 141 today, trust me. But he normally ran in the high one teens, 120s, and as Mr. Neustadt pointed out, Prove Out beat him. But Prove Out was a great racehorse too. Class versus speed. Okay, we've talked about horses that run for more money. That's called class. Does a horse have more class or does he have speed? There are horses that we call cheap speed that get out there and you hope they can last. They often don't. You have a better chance of them lasting if they're running on their own and setting their own pace, and the jockey's experienced and can relax them, and that works very well. Speed versus class is something that you have to figure out. Time form ratings. We'll show you that in when we get to handicapping the Derby. The time form ratings indicate the pace of the race. And there are horses that run very well early, and there are horses that run very well late. And they get a time form number. And time form is also very helpful for European races because it gives you kind of an idea of a comparison. Time forms generally are a little bit higher than what Beyers are, but it gives you an idea of what the level of competition and how fast that horse was running. Um, there are other figures that other people use. I just don't happen to use them. There's Brisnet, there's Thorograph, there's all kinds. There used to be something called the Rags, Len Ragozin. I may have mentioned them before. I don't remember if I did. I didn't. He had his own kind of Beyer-like system to do numbers, very well respected as well. Like I said, different plays for different players. I happen to prefer Beyers. Then there are race comments. We'll see the race comments. Was it a clean trip? Did they make a middle move? Did they run on, indicating they had plenty of energy? Did they race wide? Did they run into trouble? All of those things are caught on the trouble line, which we will see when we get to handicapping the Derby. Post positions, does it matter? Yes and no. The post position one in the Derby has not been very successful. The last horse to win out of the post position one, I think, was maybe Ferdinand in 1986. So we're going on 40 years. It's very tough in the Derby because it's a quick run to the rail and you got to get there. And the horse that's running the favorite of this year's Derby is Renegade, and we'll get to him. He's got the one hole. He's got a tough task ahead of him. We'll look at that. Workouts. We talked about Alan Jerkins and his fast workout. Some trainers, the workouts just matter for their consistency or their frequency. Other trainers really like to show speed on their horses. I'm not terribly impressed if he shows a lot of speed and we already know he's a speedball. We know he can run three furlongs in 35 seconds. Doing it doesn't prove much to me. Weights, we've already talked about that. Jockey choice, we've talked about that. AI, as I said, it's an aid, but not a solution. It can analyze the amount of data, but for me, it can be a little bit of an overload. And finally, we're here. Let's handicap the Kentucky Derby. I had hoped to take about an hour in doing the discussion so we could get in and handicap the Derby. And I could talk about it at some length. and we could compare it to AI. So, Louise, any questions in the chat that we should refer to before we slip over to the past performances?
No, no, they're not. We're ready for the Kentucky Derby.
Fantastic. Let me get there and let me see if I can figure it out. Uh, okay, help me again. What do I need to do? Hit escape?
Yep.
Uh, how come it's just going boop on me here? Uh,
Just need to not make it full screen so you can minimize it.
okay, so let's see. Where do I go to not make it full screen? As you can see, I'm a troglodyte when it comes to this stuff. Um, I'm hitting escape and it's just giving me a noise. So
Um,
what
I
do I do to
I
get?
I can't see how you can just you're done with your PowerPoint, right?
I'm done with the PowerPoint.
Yeah, so can you close it?
I'm going to try.
If you go to the right, maybe the right arrow, maybe that will.
I'm, yeah, let's see.
Okay. Now
Click.
there you
There,
go.
there we go. All right. Now I want to get to, let me minimize this. And here we are. We're at the Kentucky Derby. And so we're going to go horse by horse, and I'm going to tell you what I do and don't like about each horse. And I'm going to tell you where I'm finally going to end up. I have notes that I have taken. Um, and then we're going to compare what I picked with what AI picks. All right. So we're going to start with Renegade. Renegade is the morning line favorite. Let me take a quick drink here. And you can see there's an awful lot of information about him. Here's his trainer. That's who he is. He's owned by a gentleman named Mike Reep. Well, the Reepole stable, they're very flamboyant owners. And they use Todd Pletcher, who's a very, very accomplished trainer. You can see he's run, and I'm pointing here just because there's so much to look at. I could do an entire class or maybe even an entire course on reading a daily racing form. But here we have Renegade. He's the morning line favorite. You can see that. He's 4-1. This Triple Crown, all that means is he was nominated for the Triple Crown. You have to nominate your horse for the Triple Crown or you pay an additional fee. He last ran March 28th. He ran at Oaklawn Park, which is in Arkansas. He ran a mile and an eighth. He ran a mile and an eighth, which is a furlong less than what he's going to run today. And he showed good speed. He showed a good close each time. He won by 4 lengths. He was the even money favorite. And it shows he had a four wide burst. He drifted and then he won the race. Here are his buyers. You can see his buyers are very good. They're rising. 57, he didn't get off to a great start. He chased and then he got improved. And then he got laid off a little bit from August to October, was schooled. Here's a maiden special weight race, and he won it. Now he's being asked to do a lot. I mark him with a question because his races, this little designation means the track favored closers or the track really favored closers. So when he was in Tampa, he was running on a closer track and he won, and he was the favorite. In the Arkansas Derby, he ran on a closer favoring track and he was the favorite. Here you can see what their odds were. Here's the name of the jockey, here's what he was carrying, and here's what his odds were. And you can see that little designation means he was the favorite. So, you can see from his time form, we talked about time form, late was running 116. So he runs late. A couple things about the Derby. In my opinion, deep closers have some trouble because there are 20 horses in this race. That's a lot of traffic. And if you're a deep closer and you got to run, you're going to need a lot of racing luck. And with that racing luck, you're going to have a lot that's got to go right for you down the stretch. I think Renegade, it's not so bad. He's not going to make a big run to that first turn where he could get squeezed, but he's going to have to circle this field to win it. And he's the favorite. And I have an anathema toward favorites. So I am going to take a deep breath and take this horse who they paid $975,000 for as a yearling. I'm going to throw him out. Albus. He's trained by a gentleman named Riley Mott, who is the son of the guy who I'm in the tank for, Bill Mott. And Riley, good trainer. Albus strikes me as being, oh, what the heck happened there? Let me go back. Thank you. Albus strikes me, he ran in the wood. And you notice his buyers. You notice that Renegade was running in the 90s. Albus is only running in the 80s, is a little slower. Now, the Wood win was a nice win, and look, he won it nearly 12 to 1. So he was not expected to do great. He tends to run fairly evenly. He got the lead in a couple of these races. He did nothing close to getting the lead in the Wood. And you notice Riley Mott switched to Manny Franco for this race. I think Torres might have a ride in this race too. I think he's a little bit green. I don't think, while he's talented, I don't think he's talented enough to win the Derby. His breeding is fine. He probably can get the distance. This one looks like he needs to mature a bit more. I'm going to throw him out. Intrepido, run by a gentleman named Jeff Mullins, who got into trouble for drug racing, for drugging some horses. I don't want to get into that. That's a whole other subject. But he ran in the Santa Anita Derby at a mile and an eighth. It was a speed favoring track. And the Derby, he showed a little bit of speed. He's lost to So Happy. He's lost to Potent. I don't think he makes it today. I'm going to give him the throw out. I think he's going to need a big improvement, and I just don't see. I don't see him having a racing style that's going to be successful today. Even though he did win the American Pharoah at a mile and a 16th, Into Mischief's a good sire. Not today. Not today. Litmus test. Litmus test is 50 to 1. And he's got one of the great trainers, Bob Baffert. He had a very tough time against Renegade in the Arkansas Derby. He prefers to run in front. As you can see, he's run in front. He didn't smell the lead in the Arkansas Derby, and he ran like it. He slipped a little at the break, so he has an excuse, but then he just didn't run all that well. So that's a tough, when you slip at the break in a race like that, you kind of don't have a chance. Um, I don't see this as being Baffert's big horse here. He's 50 to 1, and there's a reason why. He's going to have to capture the form that he had in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. Even with the excuse, I'm not sure he'd run more than mid 80s. He's going to have to get a lot better today. I'm throwing him out too. Um, Right to Party, Ken McPeak, excellent trainer. He also ran in the woods, showed a big close. You see, in the time form, he does pretty well on that. And he came from running back. He's a deep closer. Deep closers are not my favorite in the Derby. He's only run one once in the maiden special race. He's a nice horse, but boy, he's got to get a lot better to win. Even though his buyers are rising, they're still a cut below everyone. I say he's a throw out as well. Now here's a horse that can contend. You remember I talked about the buyers having to be around 100 because the average buyer of the winner of the Derby is like 103. This is a horse that will factor. He tends to stalk. He's not a deep closer. He's got some early speed. I don't think out of an Into Mischief um, um, sire and an Orb mare. He's got the stamina to get there. This is a very tough horse. He's won four in a row, done everything that he's asked. He's a contender. I just think he's got enough tactical speed, and Cox is a great trainer. He's got three horses in this race. I'm keeping him in as a contender. Danon Bourbon. Every year in the Derby, they have a couple horses from Europe that are invited and a horse from Japan. Needless to say, there's a horse Forever Young who I was very high on and who I bet with gusto a couple of years ago. And Forever Young did not rise to the moment. I think his ride wasn't great and it was tough. I mean, you're asking these horses to come from Asia and run a different direction than they're used to running. In the United States, they run counterclockwise. In Japan, they run clockwise. And I just don't think he's anywhere near as talented, even though he's 3 for 3. Is not he was heavy favorite in two. He looms and then he draws clear. I think this is going to be way tougher than anything he's faced before. Another throw out. So Happy, Mark Glatt, another good trainer. Back and forth with this one. He's got the Mike Smith. This man is 60 years old and he's still racing with horses in these big events. He's just a Hall of Fame Hall of Fame jockey, deservedly so. Ran 100, had the benefit of a speed favoring track, which is his forte, but he beat Potent, who's also in this race and who I actually kind of like, and I'll get that there in a minute. But he beat him, and he beat him at the odds of 7-1. He also lost to Potent by a couple of races back. So, they've been taking turns beating each other. I think he's just a little bit light in this one. And I think he's got a lot to do today, even though he's shown he can do it. I think he's going to do something they call bounce a little. I don't think he's going to run quite as fast. When a horse runs, well, he ran a 96, but I think that 86 to 100, I see him regressing slightly today, particularly with what he's about to face. The Puma. The Puma is an interesting horse. You can see his buyers are rising. He's improving. He kept on gamely in the Florida Derby. You remember I talked about he was a bit slow at the beginning, and then he got nailed at the end, and he kept on. He's also beaten Further Ado, who's in this race. This horse is a factor. I think he's well suited for this distance. I'm going to keep him in. He's at 10-1. Hopefully, he won't come in at 3/4. Here's another Japanese horse. This horse has some time form ratings because he ran in UAE, United Arab Emirates, and he ran in Korea. His time forms relate to, take about 10 to 12 points off him and you get kind of a buyer, in my opinion. Others would say, no, I'm wrong, but that's okay. He ran in some big races there. He won comfortably the UAE Derby. Good for him. He won a lot of money, but I think he falls a little bit shy, and I'm going to say no to Wonder Dean. So out of the first 10, we've got two contenders. We've got Commandment and we've got Puma. Here's Incredibolt. Incredibolt is getting a lot of interest from the wise money. They think that Virginia Derby race was a big race. I didn't think it was. I watched it. I mean, he ran nicely, but I think he got a nice pace in front of him that inured to his benefit. Even though he is getting a second look from some smart handicappers, I kind of go no, and so I'm going to throw him out. Oh, here's my boy. I'm in the tank from Bill Mott. And Bill Mott is he's run against Commandment a couple of times in Puma and hasn't beat him, but he's an improving horse. And they talk about a buzz horse, and he had some big works, but he is he's Mott. So he doesn't bring his horses to this race with no purpose. I'm thinking I'm going to keep him in for the exotics underneath. I think a win bet would be tough. A win bet would be tough. Silent Tactic. Silent Tactic, well, he's very game. And look at this. He's never finished worse than second. He's never finished worse than second in some nice races. Got caught in the Arkansas Derby by Renegade, which is no disgrace, but he's running a little light. Is this a horse that can improve by 12? And he runs late. He runs late. He's a deep closer. I'm not. I'm not. He's going to need some racing luck to get there. And I think with that 91, he's just a cut below. I don't see that 91 rising 14, 15 points that he's going to need today to do it. So I'm throwing him out. Here's the interesting one to me, Bob Baffert. Bob Baffert has run this Derby six. He's won the Derby 6 times. I think he wants to win 7 because that would mean the record. And I think this is a horse that can do it. He had the benefit of a speed favoring track last time. This is a horse, the kind of horse, his virus have improved every time. He won his first 2, the San Felipe. He lost as a favorite, but I think it was just a stepping stone. I think this horse is tractable. He's got enough early speed to stay close. I had a disagreement with Mr. Neustadt. We both like the horse, but for different reasons. I think he might be able to wire this field. That means get out there and just win it. JJ Hernandez is a good jockey, and I think he's got a chance to win it, and he's got very tasty odds. He's one of my 2 picks. Emerging market. Emerging Market is a horse that's got Chad Brown. Chad Brown is a wonderful trainer, one of the greatest trainers in the world, but he's never won a Derby. And has there been a Derby winner who's only won twice, who's only raced twice? I don't know. And it's awfully green. It's awfully green. And he kind of went, he loomed and prevailed in the Louisiana Derby, going a mile and 3/16. So that's nearly a mile and a quarter. And he still had some gas. He's out of Candy Ride, so he for sure can do this. But Chad has failed in these races. I think this one appears to be a little bit overshot here. I think he might run a nice race, but I don't think he's going to win it. Pavlovian, Doug O'Neill, very great trainer. I just don't see Pavlovian as being in the class. To win the Sunland Derby is a very nice thing. You can see these S's, they mean they're California breds, and they're just open races rather than a state bred race is better. I think he's just a cut below these. He's a no. Six Speed. Six Speed is the other horse from the United Arab Emirates. Uh, Wonder Dean took the measure of him before. He has some tactical speed, but I think his time forms I would like a little higher. I just don't think he's going to be there. Although he picked up BJ Hernandez. BJ's a good rider. 50 to 1 in the morning line. Don't think he's that long, but I just don't see him winning here. Here's a horse you got to contend with. Look at what he's done. He's won by 11. Look when he ran in the bluegrass. You can't ignore that. People may think he might bounce off the bluegrass, but boy, that was one powerful race. He flipped his leads. He was ridden out. He just ran a great race. And look what else he did. Maybe it's a horse for course thing. Look, he won at Keeneland by 20, and he won at Keeneland by 11. So he clearly likes to strip at Keeneland. I think you can't ignore this. He's a very strong contender today. So he and Potent are my two big contenders. And here's my love affair this year is with if you're looking for a box cars horse to try to hit the board at 30 to 1, I like Sherry DeVoe. Sherry DeVoe's got this horse primed, I think. He was not far behind Emerging Market, went a mile and 3/16 out of Curlin, who won this race. I think this horse, his buyers are a little light, but if anybody can do the leap up here, and at those long odds, I'm certainly putting him in my exactas. Finally, we end with Full Effort. Full Effort to me has never run on dirt. Look at this. Turfway Park. He ran on the synthetic surface 3 times, and then he ran on the turf 4 times. So this is his first try at dirt. Cox is good, but boy, this horse is really going to have to improve. He got Gaffalione to ride him, which is good, but he's coming out of the 20 hole as a deep closer. He's going to have a lot to do. So what do I see? I see if I'm playing this race, I'm going to play Potent to win it, but I'm also going to play him with Further Ado, and underneath I like Commandment and Chief Wallaby. And let me look at my notes here. Yep, that's how I kind of see it. We'll see if Potent can win it, if Chief Wallaby can run a race, and if Commandment is really the horse he could very well be. He's won his last 4, and he's a great racehorse. So we put him under with Sherry DeVos. Now, looking at this, who did AI pick? Well, AI picked the favorites. They still like Renegade, even though Renegade has, let me find my sheet because I wrote down precisely what they like. Um, you'd think I'd find it. You'd think I'd have it someplace. Ah, yeah, here we go. They like Renegade, they like Commandment, and they like Further Ado. Sorry to dazzle you a little bit. So they like 2 of the 3 favorites. They think Incredibolt is a value play. I do not. If we go back to Incredibolt, there he is. I think Incredibolt's going to be in tough. They like him at 20 to 1. We'll see. Maybe they're right. And they also like Chief Wallaby and they like the Puma. So we'll see who does better. Do they do better? They're picking Renegade to win it. Commandment, Further Ado, Incredibolt, and Chief Wallaby in the exactas. That's who they're picking. I'm picking Potent to win it with Further Ado, Golden Tempo, Commandment, and the Puma in my exactas. And that's how I see the race going. Is it going to be the favorite? Is it going to be Baffert winning his seventh with Potent? And at the odds, and I won't deny it for a minute, when I see Potent and I see 20 to 1, I get kind of drawn in. That's how I see the race going. That's what I give to you. It's 20 after 1. I think we're in time. And I
Hmm.
will open it up to anybody who has questions or thinks I'm talking through my hat.
Jeremy, this is just great. It's everything that we had hoped it would be in terms of factual and in terms of the feel of the game, the feel of betting. You know, as you were going through those, you were citing stats, but you were also giving your gut feeling about it. I don't think
Yeah.
it's his time yet. I don't think it's this is the right time or the right course or whatever for him. So thank you. Mr. AI might not put his heart
Well,
into it, you know.
Mr. AI could shame me on this one. He and I have a very different opinion on the abilities. Renegade's a great horse. I say he doesn't overcome the post.
Okay. We do have a few questions.
Love to hear him.
Miriam has the questions. Do most people bet online or at the track?
Most people bet online now. Most
Okay.
people bet online. The track is just there just aren't enough people at the track generally to, and most tracks now are lined up with casinos, particularly the smaller tracks. Churchill Downs isn't, and Belmont isn't, but Pimlico might soon be, and because they're renovating it. So yeah, no, they don't. Most of their money now comes from offline.
Gotcha. Um, Also, Miriam asked the question that she heard from the Kentucky Derby vet. I don't know personally or read it. That horses with longer necks are more likely to win. Is that correct?
Maybe. I mean, I have
Okay.
not. Actually, it's interesting. There was a very famous horse race handicapper named Clem Florio, and Clem Florio was an expert at something called body language. And he could tell from a horse, and every once in a while, I'll see it too. A horse will all of a sudden be so excited to race that he'll line up at the race at the starting gate before anybody else lines up. He called it the wiggle. Every once in a while, you see the wiggle, but it's much easier to see the wiggle when you're at the track than when you're betting from online. So I don't see it all that much. But sure, why not? I mean, he might be right. I have no idea. Do I take neck length into my calculus as I do when I handicap? No. Nor will you see neck length in the past performances.
Okay, thank you. Patricia asks, was it ever determined why some of the horses died at
Oh
Santa
gosh, yeah, Santa Anita.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's been there are a lot. I am not proud of the record that some of these tracks have vis-a-vis these horses. There was I don't know tons about it, but I know some. There was a lot of conjecture over drugs. There was which certainly probably had some hand in it. Also the racing surfaces, but they've gone and they've resurfaced them. Clearly, they recognized that it couldn't continue and there would be a black eye on the sport if they let it continue. So they have, and the synthetic tracks have helped as well. There have been fewer breakdowns on that. So yeah, they're trying to address it. I think the statistics show that they are their numbers are going down. Are they gone forever? They are not. Whenever you have, 1,000-pound animals running on those thin legs, um, those things will happen, unfortunately, and it's sad to see. But hopefully they're taking methods to try to, if not certainly not eliminate, but certainly reduce.
thank you. Let me see. I think we might have one or two more questions. What makes a trainer great Uh, what methods do you admire?
Oh, wow. Well, Michael Dickinson gave us a clue. What makes a happy horse? There are trainers who just, and they're owners, because the owners are complicit in this too. I can look at this Kentucky Derby list, and if you look at the Kentucky Derby list, there's something called the also eligible list, and I look at the also eligible list, and these horses shouldn't be in the Derby. They just shouldn't. But they have owners, and a lot of pomp and circumstance goes into owning a horse. The trainers that are good sense the horses, they know the horses, they learn from them. They just have the ability to, horses have personalities, and they have the ability to take those personalities and either curtail them in some instances or enhance them in others. And they're lucky if they grow up in the business like Riley Mott, who's got two horses in here. His dad knows what he's doing. He was raised on a horse farm in South Dakota, and he's just been around the game, and he knows what it takes to succeed. And it's what makes a great athlete, or what makes a great baseball manager, or what makes a great football coach is their ability to understand the game and understand people. Here it's just horses.
Jean says, do they really call horses by all those very crazy names they're given
Yes,
officially, or do owners, trainers, and jockeys use other nicknames
they
when
use
they
other
interact
nicknames.
with
They
the?
use other nicknames. The other nicknames, the naming protocol, the Jockey Club keeps track of all the names, and you look at the names. There can be no more than 18 characters, and a space is a character. It can't be obscene. It can't be. It is often, you know, um, can be a combination of names of sires and dams. It can also be the name of a famous person if that famous person agrees. Chris Evert, the tennis star, there was a champion filly, and I think the 1970s or 80s, who she agreed in writing could be named after her. And so Chris Evert is, I think, one of the great female runners of all time. So they can agree to that. Can't be obscene, can't be just numbers. And there are even clever owners who, because track announcers have to call out the names of all the horses as they're running around, they will try tongue twisters. I remember seeing a horse named Fleet Flat Feet. Imagine trying to say that when you're trying to say the names of 8 or 10 other horses in the race, and here comes Fleet Flat Feet. Blah, 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 blah. So jokesters among us would do that, but there are naming protocols, and yeah, they're not known by. You don't say, "Hey, Golden Tempo, what are you doing?" They probably have a short name for that horse. Anything else? Louise? Louise went away. Laura, did Louise go away?
Uh, I think she's still here. Uh,
Okay.
well,
I don't see her on the
okay. Just a few comments have come in. I can share.
okay.
I think Robert must be a friend of yours. He's complimenting you.
Yes.
Um, and he said uh, for us to let him know where he should mail his Derby winnings if you're right. And a startling fact about you is that if
Uh-oh.
there was an event for backward running had been in the Olympics, you'd be wearing a gold medal. Are you a backward
Well,
runner?
it's a joke.
Okay.
We were on the same track team together. He could run fast. I could not.
Okay.
Um, but one thing I could do faster than even our sprinters was run backwards for the first 15, 20 yards. For some reason, I can really run backwards fast.
Well, that's
So there you
amazing.
go.
Um,
Only he would know that. And we've been friends for a long time, and he teases me about that incessantly.
that's great. Laura asked, can you start betting now, or when does betting open?
Yeah, you can if you've got an online service that allows you to bet on the Derby, you could do it now. I only bet on Derby Day because so much can happen. Horses can drop out, they can get sick. You just don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes the track conditions could change. So there's a lot going into the calculus. But yeah, if you have an online service, they may be accepting bets on the Derby
And
now.
what time does betting close?
Betting closes at post time.
What's post time?
Post time is the time when the horses are all lined up in the starting gate and you hear ding and the starting gates open. That's when betting closes.
Okay. So it's really right at the
Oh
moment.
yeah. Oh yeah. That's why in
Yeah.
that last flash, depending upon in the Derby, not so much because so much money's bet, but in the smaller tracks, particularly, you can get a variance in that last flash.
All right. Well, I think that the Derby is it's on Saturday, right?
It is this Saturday at
Yeah, give us a race time.
race time, I believe, is 6:57.
And there's
Yep,
all
post
sorts of
time.
other races that day.
There are.
Do they
There are.
televise some of the other races?
Yes, they do. In fact, they where you see all these G1, those are G1 stakes races. They're going to televise all of them.
Okay.
The big show on NBC will just be the Derby, but you will have on an NBC Sports or something like that. They're probably going to televise most of the card because there's a big turf race, the Turf Classic that goes. That's always a great race to watch. Um, there's the sprint, the Churchill Downs Stakes, which is a sprint. That's always a fun race to watch. The turf race for grade one for American turf. That's always a great race to watch. So there's a lot of great racing on that day. And it's a lot of fun.
Great. Well, thank you so very much for joining us today and very informative. And I honestly think I ha learned so much. I'm going to have to watch the recording to really understand it all.
Okay. I'm sorry. I smooshed a lot of stuff in there pretty quickly, but it's just it's what I know, and I hope you got something out of it, and I'm always happy to answer questions.
Sounds like a great hobby.
It's a
Um,
lot of fun.
I put in the chat for everybody a link to the survey. It's a quick evaluation survey to give us feedback about today's event. It takes you less than a minute. So it's in your chat. You can click on the link and go to SurveyMonkey. And